I've identified more than 10 players who are ready to explode in fantasy football. These guys are seeing a massive increase in their role, in their usage, and they could absolutely be monsters down the stretch in fantasy football and help fantasy teams take home championships. And let's start with Kareem Hunt, who every year it seems like his role increases at some point and he becomes a monster in fantasy football. And here we go. Once again, it's happening. 30 carries in week 12. 30 carries. That is absolutely insane. And you look at it in the games Pacheco has missed so far this year. He's played 77% of the snaps, handled 72% of the rushing attempts, ran 46% of the routes, and he has over 16 expected fantasy points per game. Not to mention, even with Pacheco there, we know Kareem Hunt is the guy that's going to get the goal line carries. He's going to score the touchdowns. And I got to think, like, Kareem Hunt's been pretty reliable. He's been pretty solid. I got to wonder, even if Pacheco does return, is Kareem Hunt's role really going to diminish that much? I'm not sure it really does. I think Kareem Hunt is going to be a guy from now till the end of the season you can just plug into your lineup as an RB2. He always has touchdown upside. He's in this Chiefs offense. He's looked pretty good this year. The Chiefs trust Kareem Hunt. I think Kareem Hunt is an RB2 from now till the end of the season. And we've seen a big shift with the Giants backfield since Brian Daboll was fired. In the 2 games since Brian Daboll has been fired, Tyrone Tracy has handled 39 rush attempts and caught 7 passes. He's been the workhorse here, but what was really big in week 12 that I think is going to take Tyrone Tracy to the next level for fantasy is he got more of the inside the 5 carries this week. Remember, in the previous 3 games, he hadn't played a single snap inside the 10-yard line. Then this week, he got more inside the 5 attempts than Devin Singletary. This is going to take Tyrone Tracy to that level that fantasy managers wanted when they dropped a bunch of fab on him after the Cam Skattebo injury. Maybe it's the coaching change, maybe it's just the way it's going, but if Tyrone Tracy is going to get this kind of volume plus the inside the 5 carries, meaning he can score touchdowns, he's going to be great rest of the season. I think Tyrone Tracy, again, if you blew a bunch of fab or you had him on your bench after the Skattebo injury and you were a little disappointed that first game post Skattebo, I think it's going to be okay for Tracy. Another guy I think is just going to be a solid RB2 with upside every week rest of the season. And look, Travis Etienne has been mostly good this year, but there was some worry after week 11 that maybe Bashal Tutin was starting to, take over, starting to get more of a role. Well, that did not happen in week 12. Now, maybe it was the fact that Tutin was coming off an injury, or maybe it's just the fact that Etienne has been good this year. But whatever is the case, he handled 64% of the snaps, 53% of the attempts, and ran 45% of the routes in week 12. He was clearly the guy here. Bashal Tutin was barely involved. Plus, since the team's bye, he's had at least 15 carries in every game, and he's had 4 or more targets in all but one of those games. Travis Etienne has looked good pretty much the entire season. He's certainly looked good down the stretch here. He had that kind of mid-season lull where he didn't look so good, but he's kind of turned it on again here. He's looked good. He's clearly the number 1 back here. Maybe Tutin starts to take over a little bit more or carve out a bigger role, but maybe he doesn't, because after what we saw in week 12, doesn't seem like that's going to happen. It could randomly happen here or there, but I got to think Etienne is going to be the guy rest of the season. Again, another high upside RB2, borderline RB1 from now till the end of the season. One more big running back shift that we saw in week 12 happened in Pittsburgh, where Kenneth Gainwell, for the first time all year in games where both he and Jaylen Warren were healthy and finished the game healthy, he actually played more snaps than Jaylen Warren. Now, Jaylen Warren still handled many more carries than Kenneth Gainwell, but Gainwell still did have 10 carries, and we know he's the preferred pass catching back here, and he's actually looked pretty good. He's shown some juice. He's been good running the football, and this Steelers offense is great for running backs. This running back room, for whatever reason, is great for fantasy. There is plenty here for both Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell to succeed in this offense. And if Kenneth Gainwell is going to continue to ascend this way, he might even be the preferred option, especially in your PPR leagues where that pass catching matters. Maybe Jaylen Warren more preferred in non-PPR, but Kenneth Gainwell, we got to take note now. This guy, anybody playing this many snaps and getting this kind of usage has to be startable and viable in fantasy. So if he's out there on your waiver wire, go add Kenneth Gainwell. Or if he's been sitting on your bench, it might be time to start thinking about starting Kenneth Gainwell. Now, before I move on to the rest of the list, I just want to say if you're enjoying this video, please take 1 second hit that like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, we'd greatly appreciate it. Let's move on to wide receiver now. And yeah, so much for a 1 week wonder with Michael Wilson. Wow, backed up what he did a couple weeks ago with a massive 14 catch, 118 yard game. Now has 29 catches over the last 2 games. And what's crazy about this is Marvin Harrison has never had more than 7 catches in his entire NFL career. And in just 2 games out, Marvin Harrison, Michael Wilson has 29 total catches. But why I'm really putting him on here is because, yeah, I mean, look, everybody's seen what Michael Wilson has done. Nobody in your league is like, who's Michael Wilson? Not anymore, at least. But I got to think now, even when Marvin Harrison comes back, he's got to have a pretty good role here, right? I mean, Brissett obviously trusts Michael Wilson. He's looking for Michael Wilson. And it makes you wonder, like, how have the Cardinals not been using Michael Wilson this whole time? Like, he's this good and you're not using him? But regardless, if Marvin Harrison returns, or I should say when he returns, because you got to think he's coming back at some point, I still think Michael Wilson is going to have a role in this offense. And for however many games Marvin Harrison is still out for, again, don't know if it's going to be this week or beyond, or if he's going to come back this week. But for any games he misses, Michael Wilson has to be a strong start in fantasy with Jacoby Brissett, the way he's being used in this offense right now. And now every year we see like a second half rookie running back or wide receiver who didn't do anything for the first half of the season come on down the stretch and help fantasy teams, and it just might be wide receiver Jaden Higgins. Over the last 3 games, he's tied with Dalton Schultz for the second most targets on the team. He's second behind only Nico Collins in first read percentage over that stretch. He leads the team in touchdowns, and he's also tied with Nico Collins in end zone targets over that stretch. This is despite the fact he's only run 55% of the routes over the last 3 games. But we've seen that start to go up. And in fact, in week 12, he ran 67% of the routes while leading the team in both target share and expected fantasy points. Now, of course, this has all been with Davis Mills under center. CJ Stroud is coming back, but I don't think CJ Stroud is going to come back and be like, yeah, I don't know who that Jaden Higgins guy is. I'm not going to throw him the ball. I still think Jaden Higgins is going to be involved. It looks like the coaching staff is starting to get trust. And remember, it sometimes takes rookies time for the coaches to get trust, for them to, acclimate to the speed, learn the playbook, especially the blocking schemes, which is very important here. But if he's going to start running 70, 75, 80% of the routes, getting end zone targets, getting targets, he's going to have massive fantasy value the rest of the season. And again, nobody in your league is really taking notice yet. I know Pierre talked about him on the waiver wire video. Maybe he'll get scooped up in some leagues, but he's still out there in a ton of leagues. I think you got to add Jaden Higgins, or if you already got Jaden Higgins, it's time to start thinking about starting Jaden Higgins. And even a little bit deeper here, the New York Jets might have some fantasy gold in John Mechie. Now, after the Sauce Gardner trade, remember Adonai Mitchell was included in that trade. He was a guy people were kind of excited for, like, ooh, okay, fresh start. Let's see what he can do. And look, he's gotten the usage here, but the problem is he can't catch the football. Over the last 2 games, Mitchell has more targets and more end zone targets than Mechie. But between the two, Mechie has more catches. In fact, on 13 targets, Adonai Mitchell has only caught 3 passes. Meanwhile, John Mechie has caught 9 of his 10 targets. The most important thing a wide receiver can do is actually catch the football, and for some reason, Mitchell can't do it. Now, I can't guarantee that John Mechie is going to continue to be this good. Maybe the Jets are just going to try to force Adonai Mitchell to be a thing, since again, they did just trade for him. That could certainly be the case here. But at least Mechie is catching his passes, getting yards, scoring touchdowns. Things that actually score fantasy points. And I do also have to address the elephant in the room, which is Garrett Wilson will probably be back at some point. And when he comes back, that's certainly going to hurt the upside, well, for both these guys, but especially for John Mechie. But for however many games Garrett Wilson is out, John Mechie is looking like a decent flex play. In fact, I really wanted to put him on the Sneaky Starts video, but I chickened out. I shouldn't have chickened out. I should have put him on there. I really liked John Mechie's matchup last week, but I was like, it's Tyrod Taylor and the Jets. I can't get too excited. But he showed it doesn't matter. So John Mechie has got to be a guy we are seriously looking at in fantasy. I'm not going to say he's going to be a stud, a league winner, or anything like that, but he certainly at least has flex value right now. And I know a lot of us are struggling at tight end, but there are some good tight end options that are starting to come on right now. Let's start out in Tennessee. Yes, Tennessee, the Titans, with rookie tight end Gunnar Helm. I wish I could say Chig Okonkwo, but I can't say Chig Okonkwo. As much as I love Chig, he's kind of being phased out of this offense. But meanwhile, Gunnar Helm is seeing his role increase. In fact, last week, he tied Chimere Dike for the team lead in targets, caught 6 of them for 51 yards. And over the last 2 games, he actually leads the team in targets despite only running 44% of the routes. Look, the Titans are going nowhere this year. They're not going to make the playoffs. No chance here. They might as well see what their rookie tight end has. This is a good player, a good prospect. He's starting to get involved in this offense. We should see his route participation just continue to go up and up because, again, they might as well get a look at their young players and see what they can do. I know the Titans not the most exciting offense here, but if he's going to get this kind of target share, he still has value in fantasy football. And right now, he's only rostered in about 2% of fantasy leagues. And then if Harold Fannin was dropped in your league, or if he's just been sitting on your bench, it's probably time to start thinking about putting Harold Fannin back in your lineup because hallelujah, the Browns have already committed to Shedeur Sanders as their QB1 here in Week 12. You got to think, barring injury, he's going to be the QB rest of the season. And we saw with Shedeur, Harold Fannin was the preferred target here. He had double the targets of anybody else on the team. Now, it didn't result in a massive fantasy game, but it shows that he is the guy and that Shedeur can get him the ball, and that's good enough, especially when you realize that he has a fantastic schedule outside of the Bills in Week 16, which is admittedly a tough matchup for tight ends. Every single one of his matchups is a smash matchup for tight ends. Shedeur, you got to think, is only going to get better, only going to get more comfortable. He looked much better in Week 12. Fannin still out there in about 45% of leagues because he was dropped in a lot of leagues, probably on a lot of benches right now. I think he's a guy, especially this week, you got to consider starting back in your tight end slot. And then finally, we had a tight end return from IR last week. That was Brenton Strange, and he looked pretty good here, right? He tied Jakobi Meyers for second on the team with 5 targets, caught all 5 of them for 93 yards. And remember, prior to getting hurt in Week 5, he had scored double-digit PPR fantasy points in 3 of his 4 games. Now, technically, one game was 9.9 fantasy points, but I'm going to round that up to 10. So he was already a solid option before his injury. We know Trevor Lawrence has no problem targeting the tight ends. The Jaguars, a good offense. Liam Cohen, a good offense for tight ends here. Now, again, the elephant in the room here, Brian Thomas Jr. probably coming back at some point. At the time I'm recording this, it might be this week. I don't know. Maybe it's down the future or down the road here. But we got to think Brian Thomas Jr. is coming back at some point this year. He's not going to miss the entire season. But I still will like Brenton Strange here, even though now they are going to have Brian Thomas Jr., Jakobi Meyers, Parker Washington. Again, this offense will target the tight end enough to at least give him a decent floor every single week. And he can still score touchdowns here. So, look, Brenton Strange may not be a top 10, top 5 tight end rest of the season, but if you're struggling at the position and you're in a deeper league, he could be good enough. If you're struggling to make your fantasy playoffs, or maybe you're trying to get that first round bye, we got you covered. All the videos you need to dominate in Week 13, you're going to find them in our playlist right here.